Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. As many of you are probably very aware, Australia has a massive inflation problem. Inflation was never solved. And if you were watching the news yesterday, on Wednesday, we got our monthly inflation number, and you'd probably think, oh, well, things aren't so bad. Now, keep in mind what's going on with this conflict in Iran. Uh, those those problems, those price increases are not yet in Australia's inflation numbers. We've only got the number to the end of February, right? So what's happening now in March, we'll get that number in April. But if you watch the news, Australia's inflation cools slightly. I hate the way they report this. You know, that inflation has eased slightly down to 3.7% over the 12 months to February. It was 3.8% on an annualized basis when the number came out last month. So your cost of living is still going up, but going up another 3.7% per year on top of how much it's already gone up. So that's inflation's not really. I find it a little bit misleading the way they word this sort of thing, but you take that as you see fit. But keep in mind what's going on with the conflict overseas, not yet in the inflation numbers, and our inflation is a it's not because of international factors. We have an inflation problem because we have a real estate mega hyper bubble caused by the government and the RBA. And of course, we have a very silly nanny state government that is contributing to inflation. And again, we're looking at the Australian Bureau of Statistics. And if we look at the largest contributors to inflation, housing, right? What's that got to do with what's going on overseas? And the government doesn't even report these numbers correctly because I've shown in previous videos that rents are going up. Like when we look at advertised rents in the market, they're increasing about double the rate that the Australian Bureau of Statistics is reporting. Part of that has to do with, if people are getting, Commonwealth government rent assistance, if you're getting like a getting help from Centrelink. The government, if your rent goes up $50, but you get an extra $50 from the government, well, the government says, hey, there's no inflation there, right? They're not counting the cost of the actual rent. They're counting the cost that you pay, and a lot of people are receiving benefits from the government. Same thing happened with the electricity rebates. But if we look at housing percentage change 7.2%. I mean, that's for working class Australians. Their biggest expense is their mortgage or their rent, right? Especially rent. 7.2%, more than double the overall inflation rate. And if you took, and housing is about 22% of the CPI, which I'll get to that later. They're not counting, they're not weighting it high enough in my view. But if you took housing out, everything else would only be going up, what, 2%, 2.5%. So our real estate mega hyper bubble is the primary cause of our, not it's not the only cause, but it's certainly a key factor in Australia's inflation problem. Anyway, I'm rambling a bit, so I'll come down to show you something that I've shown in previous videos, tradables versus non-tradables. So essentially what we're measuring is international inflation. So inflation in Australia, things that are caused by international factors. So, if you're watching this on a phone or a computer or a TV that wasn't made in Australia, that was made overseas. So if the price of that's going up, it's not really to do with domestic factors. It's to do with, overseas production. So non-tradables. So non-tradables are goods and services produced and consumed locally, as they cannot be easily traded internationally due to high transport costs. So things like housing, electricity, education, healthcare, things that are happening in Australia. How's that inflation rate going? It's continuing to trend up. It was 4.3% in November, 4.6% in December, 4.9% in January, 5% in February. Inflation domestically in Australia is on the rise. It has never, now, it did briefly go to 2.9%. The RBA's target is 2 to 3% inflation. Are you happy about that? That the RBA is deliberately trying to make your cost of living go up about 2.5% a year? And they're failing at that. Your cost of living, your domestic factors, your electricity costs, your rent, your mortgage, food costs here, like, locally grown food or things you get from the grocery store that are made in Australia, et cetera, all these things that are factored in to the non-tradables inflation. That number's already 5%. Keep in mind that only goes to February. So what's that going to look like in March and April and May after, what's happening with the Iran conflict, what's happening to petrol prices, It's not just that. I mean, it's all sorts of things. The fertilizer that we need to import, we import about 85% of our fertilizer, so it's going to be tough to grow food. It's going to be not tough. I'm sure the food will get grown, but it's going to be a lot more expensive to grow it, more expensive to transport it around. It's probably going to be some shortages. And of course, our treasurer has already admitted that, well, first he said inflation might go to the high fours. Now he's saying 5% inflation. This is a screenshot from ABC News. Chalmers concedes 5% inflation scenario is conservative, meaning he's hedging his bets now and going, oh, geez, it's probably going to go to 6% or something. So your cost of living is going to be going up even faster, not just more than it's already gone up. It's going to be going up faster than it has been. And I mean, I know it's painful, but the RBA they need to have an emergency meeting and they need to dramatically raise interest rates. I understand that will be very painful, but we've been doing this for decades, blowing up a real estate mega ultra hyper bubble. And I'll show that in a sec. So Commonwealth Bank raises home loan rates for the second time this month. And if you look down the bottom of the screen, rates for owner occupiers, so regular people buying a house, 7.19%. Now, you may recall the government got a whole bunch of new suckers to come into the market with their 5% deposit scheme in the second half of 2025. And if we have a look at New South Wales, and obviously dominated by Sydney, our most populous city, the average new owner-occupier mortgage in New South Wales is approximately $828,000, estimates up to $870,000. So these mortgages in New South Wales. Now, I understand regional areas people would have smaller mortgages, but a big chunk of the population lives in Sydney, all right, and so this is going to be a problem. Now, so people have taken on these loans. 828,000 is the average. That means there's a bunch of people with $1 million loans. Pull out your calculator and do 7.19%, and the interest costs on that loan. In year one, you'll be paying nearly $60,000 just to pay interest. That's not your mortgage payment for the year. That is just the cost of the interest. $60,000. And keep in mind, when you pay your mortgage, you pay interest on your mortgage. That's with after-tax money, right? So you can't pay for your mortgage with pre-tax income. You have to pay your income tax and then you pay your mortgage. So, what's the average? These households are in big trouble. Anyway, coming back to what I said about housing inflation, percentage of income spent on rents. And this is a little bit old, this data now, but Australians on average are spending 33% of their income to pay rent. So when rental inflation or when housing costs are going up as much as now, the government's saying rents aren't going up as much. I don't know how many of you necessarily agree with those government numbers, but the point being is that rent or mortgage, and I'll show you mortgages now, and this is from November 2025. All right, so interest rates have gone up twice since November 2025, so this number is probably getting worse. Households are spending as of 2025, and there's different ways to measure it, so I understand this could be a biased number, but 45% of household income is going to the mortgage, and interest rates have gone up 2 times since this data came out, and it's highly likely that interest rates are going to have to go up multiple times more. We'll see if the RBA has the guts to increase interest rates. I question whether they have the balls to do it. Wartime inflation shock, catastrophic as fertilizer and plastic soil. So, you need fossil fuels to make plastics. And a lot of fertilizers are, a byproduct or made from fossil fuels. I understand I'm not a scientist here. I'm just looking at it from a money nerd perspective, but I have a basic enough understanding and you can read some of these articles if you like. So, for example, like like a key oil derived from oil-derived liquid used in making resins that are widely used in plastic manufacturing, rubber, building products like PVC pipes. Prices up 50%, and then, the fertilizer cost. So you can see the price. So that's when the Iran war launched. Have a look at some of these. You got Brent crude, which is European oil, and some of these other chemicals that are used in plastics, fertilizers. Have a look at the costs. look at the costs going up, 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 right? And then if you come across here, Australia relies heavily on imported fertilizer, with imports accounting for roughly 7 so approximately 85% of total consumption. And then, so 85%, I saw a news report tonight that 96% of our, I think they said 96% of our fertilizer is imported. I'm going to say they probably overstated that number, but the number is probably around, the 85% mark. Feel free to do your own research. I didn't quote the higher number to favor my, inflation is coming argument. I picked the lower number that the AI got for me. Over 40% of imports come from the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. So, like, our farmers need these fertilizers to grow our food. So I'm not calling for doom and gloom that there's going to be no food. I'm not saying you're going to run out of food. What I'm saying is that the price is going to be going up substantially. And check out some of my previous videos on Australia's inflation problem. They're the most recent videos on my channel, and also as the video comes to an end and things pop up here, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see my video about the US debt situation and their inflation situation. Please watch that video, because, like it or not, the United States is still in some ways, it's the centerpiece of the global economy, as is the US dollar, and what's going on in the United States will have a massive impact on the rest of the world. So it's important to educate yourself about what's going on there. I couldn't promote that video, unfortunately, because YouTube is telling me that it's election interference, because I'm talking about politicians or criticizing the US government or whatever. So I'd like to get that information out there a little bit more. But thank you for watching this one, and don't panic and go and hide away in a bunker somewhere with tin food that's with canned food, and it's not that bad. Well, it's certainly not anywhere near there yet, but just be aware that we've got a massive inflation problem, and it's not because the politicians are going to try and blame it on what's happening in Iran. And yes, this is adding to the problem, but Australia's had an inflation problem. It's before the Iran conflict broke out, and it's a domestic problem, a problem of our own making. Thank you for listening. Cheers.